Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me. In this tutorial I am going to show you a couple techniques on how to make your images softer. I softened this one up quite a bit. This is the image that we are going to be using. So we went from here to here. Now let's get started. And so the first thing that I am going to do is I'm going to raise up the exposure a little bit. Looking at it, it's a little bit too dark, and I did not correct that in my raw adjustments before opening it in Photoshop. So I'm just going to do that real quickly now. So I'm going to grab a new exposure layer, and I'm just going to up this until I like the way that it looks. I think that's enough. I don't want it to be too much, but you can definitely tell with looking at the after that the before was very dark. So that looks good, and I'm just going to leave this on my whole image. And now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to darken the background, and I'm going to do that with a curves layer, and I'm going to pull my blacks up just a little, and then I'm going to also pull them down. To about there. And then with my black brush, because I want to take some of this adjustment off, with my black brush at 100%, I am going to then paint that adjustment off of the skin. And I am going to grab this little area and her ear, and then I'm also going to paint it off of a couple other key parts of the image. So one would be her hair right here, and then back here, and then I'm going to grab her shoulder. I am going to come and fix this little dot that's right here. Okay, and now I'm going to come back up to my top layer, and I'm going to do my dodging and burning. So my first layer is going to be burn, and I'm just going to pull my center straight down. I'm going to go pretty dark with this. About right there, and I'm going to hit Control-I to invert that, and then I'm going to come and do my dodge, and I'm going to grab the center dot and take it directly up. And again, I'm going to invert that, and now I'm going to come back down to my burn layer, and with my white brush at a 30% opacity, I am going to paint the dark back on the shadows and the darker parts of the image. And now that I have that where I want it, I am going to come up to my dodge layer, and with my white brush at 30%, I am going to paint over the lighter parts and the highlights. And now that I have that done, I am going to group both of these together, And I'm going to turn that on and off to make sure that I got my dodge and burn exactly where I wanted it. If I see something, I can easily fix it. And that looks good to me, so I'm going to leave the opacity of this folder at 100%. And now I am going to grab a color balance layer, and I am going to add a little bit more pink into her shirt. And I'm just going to do that by adding some red and some magenta. I'm going to hit Control-I to invert that, and then with my white brush at 100% opacity, I am going to paint that on her jammies. And then I am going to lower this whole layer to 50% opacity. I am then going to add some red to her lips and her cheeks, and I'm going to do that with a curves layer. I'm going to go to my red channel and raise up my reds, and then I'm going to come back to my RGB channel and I am going to lower my midtones. I'm going to hit Control-I to invert that, and then with my white brush I'm going to paint that over her lips. And on her cheeks. And then I am going to lower the opacity of that quite a bit. I would say about 45. I now want to warm this up and make it a little bit lighter. So I'm going to do that with another curves layer, and I'm just going to lower the blues a little, go to my reds and raise the reds a little, and then raise the midtones just a tad as well. I am going to lower the opacity of this layer to about 40%. Okay. And now we're going to come and we're going to add a new fill layer, solid color. And this is our color. I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to come and I'm going to change that blending mode to soft light. And then I'm going to lower the opacity. I want to bring out some of these highlights just a little bit more, so I am going to grab another curves layer and I am going to pull up my midtones. I'm going to hit Control-I to invert that. With my white brush at 100% opacity, I am just going to paint it over a couple of these highlights here to make them really stand out. And I am also going to leave that layer at 100%. I am now going to soften this image up a little bit, and I am going to do that with a levels layer. And in my RGB, I'm going to change the output to 30, and then I'm going to come and I'm going to put a little red in it, and I'm going to change that output to 10. And I am going to leave that over my whole image, but I am going to kind of take it away on some key areas, which is going to be probably this side of her face. I might take it a little bit from her hair and her shoulder here, just to kind of draw you to those parts. So with my brush opacity set to 30%, I'm going to tap it off of here. I'm going to tap it off of her shoulder here, and all this is going to do is it's kind of bringing that contrast back, those details. And then I'm just going to stamp it over this eye more than the rest. So now you're automatically drawn to the contrast of that eyelid, and then kind of from there you can go around and admire the softness of that. You can see what a difference that made. Another thing I do to add softness to my images is I just add some light. So I'm going to put a new layer here, and then I'm going to come and I am going to grab a color. It would either be this, maybe this lightest color here because it kind of looks like there's light, or it would just be a white or a really pale yellow. And with the opacity at 100%, I'm going to make my brush as big as I possibly can. And I'm going to come and I'm going to tap that over where the light is coming from in this image. So then I am going to come and change the blending mode of that layer to screen. And I'm going to lower the opacity of it just a little bit. And that adds another level of softness to that image. And then another way I soften my images is I grab another new layer, and I'm just going to grab one of the more dominant colors, which is going to be one of these browns. So I'm just going to grab a brown color. And then I'm going to grab my brush, and with my brush at 100% opacity, I am just going to paint around the image. I want her face and right here to be the story of the image, so I'm just going to paint around everything other than that. And then I am going to lower that layer to about 30%. And then that softens it as well. I am now going to add the final touches. I am going to add a little bit to some of the highlights. And so with my white brush at 100%, I'm going to tap this on her forehead and her eyelid. And just a couple other minor parts that I really want to stick out on her face. That might be too much. I'm going to back it off of that cheek right there. I'm going to get her hair. And then I am going to go to color balance, and I'm just going to add a little red. And we are done. So from that to that, from that to that. Thank you guys so much for joining me.